Okay, we're back with episode 2 of Standing By. Welcome. This is a show where you call in and leave us a message, and we will answer that question live on the radio.
Or just talk about it.
Or
Doesn't have
talk
to be a
about it.
question.
Yeah, you're right. It could
You
just
can
be
tell
a
us your
discussion.
story.
Yep, dig it. You can call 872-265-1818 and leave us a message.
And we'll try to be here every Tuesday to respond.
Yep.
But call anytime. All right, let's take the first call. Let's see.
Yep. Let me tune that radio in. Standing by here. Okay.
Go ahead.
Ben and Teresa, this is Jerry and Robin on Scupper's Song out in the harbor. And we anchored out an awful lot last year. We had a great time, and we're about to start doing it again. And we did have a question on our trip line attachment point on the anchor. We haven't used it. We haven't seen anyone else using them. But as I've read about it, I see two positives. One is we might be able to recover a stuck anchor if we get caught on a shipwreck or a submerged car or something and can't pull it up. Rather than have to drop the anchor and chain and leave it, we could maybe trip it and get it back aboard. So that would be good. The second positive is that it would show others where our anchor really is, because we've had the experience where we've set the hook and everything's been good, but then our boat has rotated 180 degrees without pulling the chain and resetting the anchor. So in actuality, our anchor is behind the boat by whatever length of chain we've set out, maybe 100 feet, 120 feet. I think marking it might be good in that aspect. Drawback I see is that if you've got a trip line and a buoy out there over your anchor, it may limit the amount of boats that can get into the anchorage, because now no one can swing over your anchor easily because of your buoy out there. So anyway, we're looking for some input on that. What are your thoughts? Yay or nay on the anchor trip line? So we're looking forward to hearing from you on that.
Okay, so I think we've only used trip line a few times, actually.
On Rocinante, yeah, but
Yeah.
when I was sailing with Outward Bound, we used a trip line almost every time.
Okay, tell me about it.
It was more like, we didn't call it a trip line, actually. We called it a toggle.
Uh-huh.
Because it wasn't like a heavy-duty line or anything. It doesn't need to be. And it had a toggle that floated.
A small buoy.
Yeah. So basically what he's talking about is, so your anchor sets at the bottom of the sea, and then you've got your anchor rode, and then a trip line could be just a line connected to your anchor here with a little float, a little buoy on top. That's usually like about that big, so that you can see where your anchor is. All the reasons that he explained in his message that are good. You can see where your anchor is. You can see if your boat rotates or shifts, you can still see where your anchor is. And then the idea is that if your anchor is dug into the seafloor like this, and you have a hard time for whatever reason getting it out, you can then pull this way to pull it out.
Back it out.
To back it out that way.
Yeah, it's a great idea to show people where your anchor is, too. Like you said, when you flip around 180 degrees, you could be sitting directly opposite of where your anchor.
I think this is more important actually to consider in places like Maine, because if you have a stuck anchor, you're not going to want to dive on it. But if you're in the Bahamas or the Caribbean, you could just throw on a snorkel mask and take a look and see what the issue is. And probably, maybe, I guess it depends on how deep your anchor is set in. You could potentially dive down and, clear it.
Pull it out.
Yeah.
Yep.
But in Maine, you can't do that. In Maine, you can't see very far with a snorkel on, and also you can't dive very deep because it's so cold. It's really hard to be under the deep water, and also you don't really want to.
It's dark down there.
It's dark and cold, so
great idea up here. We don't use one regularly.
We don't use one regularly, and I don't think it's because we found any particular downsides to it. I could see here in Maine the possibility for these trip lines to get stuck on lobster pot buoys. And, especially if the water is like, let's say 30 feet deep and the line is 60 feet long, or maybe you have a tide change of 10 feet, you're never going to, which you do here at places, you're never going to get your trip line the exact depth of the water because, and so it won't be perfectly straight up and down. So it's going to wander around, and you don't want it to get fouled on other things. That would be a real nuisance. It wouldn't be devastating. I mean, you could work it out, but it could be a nuisance.
Yeah, it's always been one extra added step of something to add to the anchor or remove from the anchor when you're setting it or hauling it back.
Right, and then when you haul it back up, you then have to stow. As you're hauling up, you got to stow your anchor rod, make sure that goes in well so that it can pay out well, and then you got to hose all the mud off the anchor, clean that off, and then in the meantime, your boat's drifting or moving, because you're already underway, and then you've got to coil that whole trip line.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're motoring and it's in the water, perhaps.
Yeah.
And so that's. I will say, though, that every time I did use a toggle line, my method for setting the anchor was uncoil the trip line, throw it out first.
Throw it in, yeah. Yep.
And then
drop it. Drop the anchor.
And then drop the anchor. So that you know that it's going to run free and not get stuck. You don't want the anchor to be going down and then it gets stuck somewhere on like a stanchion or something.
Right, yeah. So it goes out first and it comes in last. Because your anchor's going to come up and then you're going to, once the anchor is shipped aboard, then you're going to pull in your toggle line. And
then your toggle line's streamed out in a nice line so it's not getting all fouled and knotted and whatnot. The only problem with that is if you're underway and it streams back towards your prop.
Exactly.
So...
Yep. So I think in reality of it, it seems to
Although you could make it shorter than the length of your boat, so it wouldn't go back there. And if you know...
Sure, if you're anchored in less depth than that.
Than
Which 40, you most likely will be. For us, 45 feet. We're going to try to anchor in less than 45 feet.
Yeah.
For the most part. But sometimes with this 10-foot tide change, we don't.
Sometimes we don't.
So, great question. I can't say there's the definitive answer on this one. No. All right, here we go. Standing by. This is Ben and Teresa. Standing by. Go ahead.
Hi, Ben and Teresa. This is Carrie. I was on one of your expeditions last summer, and my wife and I were there. We had a wonderful time, and we had such a good time that we're now in the process of looking to buy a boat, and we've learned a few things about it. We're planning to buy a boat this summer and hopefully keep it in Maine, but we're trying to think through that process. We learned a lot about the survey process and the sea test and all of these things that you've got to do. But one of the big questions for us is, after we get a boat, let's say we find a boat down in Annapolis, how do we find someone to help us move that boat up to Maine? And then how do we find a place to keep the boat in Maine? So any help you can provide on that would be really wonderful. Thanks.
Great questions.
Yeah, great question. Thanks for submitting. Okay, great. Let's chat about that. So, I think moving a boat is something I can do.
Just call Ben. No.
Yeah, getting someone to help move the boat is an interesting question.
So hold on a second.
Yeah.
They said, how do we find someone to help us move the boat?
Yep.
So my thought went in two different directions. Are they looking for someone that will be knowledgeable, that will help them do it, that will guide them? Like I could interpret it that way. Or are they looking for someone that's like an extra hand on board, an able body, that will help them and they'll be the guides?
Right.
So that's two different types of people, I think.
We've done a bunch of training deliveries like that where we're teaching on other people's boats to help them move the boat from A to B.
Right. And we know a few people that still do that. In terms of finding someone to sail with you, I think, honestly, I think the best way is just to put it out there to your friends that are either sailors or adjacent to the community and just say, I'm looking for someone. Can you please ask around? Because the best way is through a personal referral, because you have to live on board with these people and they have to live with you for, a couple weeks potentially. And so it's just important that you gel really well. And so that's where I would start, is asking around like that. I honestly, personally, don't trust the forums and things like that for finding crew or people to sail with.
I think that perhaps the More South Facebook group could be a good spot for that too.
Oh, yeah.
Our former students.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yep. I would check in that group.
Because you don't know everybody that's graduated from a More South, of course, but you do know what kind of training they've had.
And we
And
know them.
also, we know them. And also, I don't know what it is, but we always have great people.
Yeah.
It's always a lot of fun. So I would sail with any of them again, really.
Yeah.
And that More Selfa Facebook group is just for graduates of More Selfa expeditions.
Right.
But we do have a More Selfa Facebook page and Instagram that are public facing for anybody to interact with.
So as far as finding a place to keep the boat, that's a great question. It all depends on where you want to be. But it would be cool if you were here, because then we'd have yet another More Alpha grad here. We've got Jerry's here, Scupper Song is here, and Misha's boat has been here. He's taking it back to Canada this year, but I think it'd be cool if we had a little More Alpha gathering in Rockland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can find a mooring available in Rockland, I think.
You could probably rent one. Yeah, so things to consider would be good storm protection.
Rockland's great.
For the fall, as those tropical storms get rolling through up here, late August,
especially the
September.
nor'easters.
Yep. You want to have the boat either in a good location for those storms, or you could be ready to haul it out as needed.
Mm-hmm.
So a good protected harbor, and then something that's convenient for you to get to, I think.
And also, I guess the other question is, are you going to have a car? Like, how long are you going to be up here? Do you need to have a mooring where you can then walk to a grocery and laundry and all those other things? Those would be things that I would look for. Like, look for a region that you want to be. Look for what harbors there are. Look at the shape of the harbor to see if it has the protection you're interested in. Find out if moorings are available. Find out where those key essentials are, like the grocery and so forth.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of harbors that are further down, like towards the ocean, and then there's some other harbors like that are far up in Penobscot Bay, like for instance Belfast.
Which is a beautiful town as well.
Might be a great location.
Mm-hmm.
Further away from the ocean swells and that sort of thing.
But the great thing about Maine is that there is, as you know, because you've sailed here, is that there's endless places to explore that are just so close and so beautiful and so mysterious and wonderful. It would be great to be up here.
Yeah.
I hope that helps. All right.
See what we got here.
Hey, Teresa. Hey, Ben. It's Martin again. I have a question regarding, sail twist. The basics for beginners like me, as taught, we're using the main sheet actually to set the angle of the mainsail to the wind, and I guess similar with the jib sheets. However, it's my understanding that the more advanced method of sail trim involves really using your traveler, for instance, for the mainsail, and using the sheet and the vang essentially to control twist. The whole idea being to get the sail shape as efficient as possible for the conditions to get the most speed out of your boat. So it would be kind of cool if you folks could go into travelers and vangs and the equivalent for the jib, as well as using leech tails to, visually indicate how sails are set and really maximizing boat speed. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Martin. We'll give it a try. Over.
Really interesting question, I think. And I think it's getting into some details that are kind of hard to answer in this format. You kind of want visuals. You kind of want to see what's happening. So I think we should just discuss some of our thoughts on this.
I'll say that when I'm sailing and I'm trying to fine-tune my sails to their best performance, there's a lot I'm thinking about, and twist is not on my mind. I'll just put that out there. But, there's other things that I'm focusing on. Certainly sail trim, which is bringing your sail closer to the center of the boat or easing it out, and that's when you use those telltales. Want to fly the 11s, they fly like this. And then that's one thing I'm thinking about. Using the boom vang, which would stretch that leech. If the leech were
the back edge of the sail.
If the leech were perhaps fluttering a little bit and you did a little more boom vang, it might tighten that up better. What else? We have the traveler, which there's where the twist comes in, I think, most. But we have that we can adjust. And then the other, if you think of all the different directions you can pull and stretch your sail, the other one would be the halyard. It's true, we sometimes don't always have our halyard tight as it should be.
And it loosens up over time.
Right. So those are some things to think about. The very first thing we talk about when we're teaching sailing, sail trim, is we talk about looking at the forward edge of the sail, the luff of the sail, and looking for that little pocket of wind behind it. Luffing can first appear just as a little puff of wind behind it. It's not like luffing like that necessarily. And we teach people to look for that. And sometimes that occurs when you're going over waves. So you need to start recognizing, is it because of waves, or is it because of sail trim or the direction in which you're sailing? So these are the things I'm thinking out about. And it doesn't really, the twist doesn't really cross my mind as a cruiser. Perhaps maybe if I were racing and not focused on
A high performance boat.
on a high performance boat where that tiny little bit matters, where the sails are mint and crisp, where I'm sailing a triangle and less concerned about navigation and what's for lunch.
I think, on a basic level, as far as the twist goes, if you see the top edge of your sail fluttering, that's where you're going to start to see it on the leech of the mainsail, perhaps. Then you need to vang down a little bit and just stretch that leech, and that's about as far as we really go with it for the most part.
Yeah, we got a lot to do. And also sometimes it really is like what Benji was saying. Like you see the sail fluttering up there, you think to yourself, well, how can I tighten that up? Try a little boom vang. Try a little
that boom down.
Yes, to stretch that leech line.
Yep. The traveler on the mainsail is only this wide or so it's really only useful when you are close hauled or close reaching.
Right. That's when we primarily
once you ease off to a beam reach or broad reach, it's not the boom is way out past the scope of the traveler, and it's not effective anymore. So it's only for a small portion of sail.
Just to get you to point a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let me just add something to that. Yeah. Because a lot of times people think, okay, let's crank in on that mainsail, bring it in as tight as we can, bring the traveler over. And in theory, yes, when you want to sail close hauled, as close to the eye of the wind as you can possibly sail, bring your sail close to the center line of the boat, and then find, head up till the sails luff and ease off until they just stop luffing, and that's your course. And that's a good rule of thumb. And this is how I always teach it. This is the rule of thumb. And that's where you should start. That's where you should begin with. But then all these little adjustments are situational. Waves, rocking of the boat. And sometimes maybe you have so much windage that it's just you're heeling way over, and at some point that becomes not efficient for your boat. You've got the rail buried in the water. It's not efficient. You'd actually sail better and faster if you ease up on that a little bit.
On your sheet.
You're looking, yes, on your sheet, or maybe your traveler is too far across the center line.
Yep.
You're looking at me like,
no.
Oh, okay.
No. Intentional luffing.
What's that?
You're saying basically intentional luffing to some degree?
No. You wouldn't necessarily start luffing if you eased up on that. I don't think you would.
You would spill a little bit by making a little belly in the sail. And also the jib, we were talking about the jib, the car as far as maintaining that angle to keep the twist in the jib. I think that's more important to me than the mainsail, is when you go to ease that jib out, you need to maintain the sheet angle to be pulling on the leech and the foot evenly. The leech and the foot you want to be pulling evenly so that you don't create a bag or a loose leech where it's twisting outward and you're spilling a lot of wind out the top of that jib.
Right, so let me just imagine this. This is taking me a second to visualize this. If you have the corner of your jib sail here, there are multiple ways you could pull on this clew of the sail, this corner. You could pull your jib sheet, the line, the piece of rope. It could go back this way. It could go back at a steep angle this way. But the best would be to go back at a perfect angle where it's pulling equally on this side and this side of the sail. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, on the leech and the foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, pulling equally on both. So as you ease that sail out, to maintain that proper angle of pulling
you've got to change your
sheet,
your little anchor point here, your block
on your deck
where it's connected.
Yeah. So we move that traveler or that fairlead block forward or aft depending on what point of sail we're on.
Right.
to keep that from twisting out up top.
But boy, when you're under full sail, sometimes it's hard to move.
Yeah, that's why some people have block and tackle on their deck to help you
Mhm.
move that car as needed.
Mm-hmm.
We do not. That's basically it. I think it's
And-
very easy to make those concepts complicated, and that makes sense in a racing scenario. But as far as a cruising sailboat, it's just much simpler. Reduce the twist as much as you can on the jib, and look at your mainsail leech and adjust your vang as needed to keep that tight.
Benji, those are all the questions that we got
Yeah.
on our voicemail today. So it's only the second episode. We'd love you all to flood our voicemail with lots of questions. Tell us your stories, your hopes and dreams. Just remember, it's 872-265-1818. But we're here in Maine getting the boat ready for the season. What were you working on today? I see a little remnants here of
Yes,
some projects.
there was some black paint happening today. So I did the two-part paint on the black stripe. I'm a big fan of two-part paint. I had painted it with one-part paint a few years ago, and it pretty much faded and rubbed off when we had fenders rubbing against it, and just went dull within 3 years. So I did two-part this time instead, and expect it to last me 8-10 years. And we also painted the bottom today.
Which you do every year.
Do every year. Exactly. And with that in mind, since I know I'm going to do it every year, I usually choose the cheapest paint. So I save money there on the bottom paint and spend it on the topside paint.
Mm-hmm. You know what I just learned? I'm working on a podcast for Discovery Channel Shark Week. And so one thing is shark skin. It's really cool. And it's been used for a couple of things. One of them was swimsuits for Olympians, but that got banned because everybody that year apparently that wore the shark skin, not actual real shark skins because you shouldn't harvest sharks, but man-made like synthetic material sharks made to mimic like a shark skin. Most of the gold medalists or, fastest record setters were wearing these types of swimsuits. So,
So we should wrap the boat in shark skin.
right. So now there's new technology that's being looked at to make the hulls of ships like shark skin, which it's not scales. They're called dermal denticles. It's like little tiny teeth. So you think sharks have big teeth in their mouth, but apparently their whole body is covered in teeny tiny teeth, which is kind of fun, but to think about it that way. But to make a hull out of this type of material. And then also it really resists barnacles.
Of course.
Not only would it increase your speed, so therefore fuel efficiency and so forth, but also it wouldn't have any growth. Like sharks are really good swimmers. They're fast. They can move through the water. It actually creates, like the way it channels the water, it actually creates like a negative vortex of some sort. It actually helps them move through the water even more. And then they don't grow barnacles. But whereas you would see like a sea turtle has barnacles growing on its shell. And sometimes whales do. But sharks have this really cool skin.
Interesting.
Just kind of a fun fact
It
in
is.
terms of bottom paint.
Yeah, right.
So
Shark paint. All right.
shark paint.
All right.
Someday.
Very cool.
All right, well that's Standing By. Don't forget to call in. We'll see you next week.
We'll be standing by.